issue of the new registrants and the IDs, mamiriro zvakaita anga akamira kudai, so kuti kumaruzeva it was not taking time, at least 5 minutes at most. And then in the urban hapana kana patakambovanzwa kuti vari kutora zvitupa, vari kutoresa zvitupa, only to find out kutoti munhu aitoti akaenda kunotora zvitupa apo panotorwa zvitupa muno mutown, it will take the whole day munhu aripo akamirira kuti awane zvitupa. Saka zvazvinoreva at the end of the day, vana vechidiki they won't have that time kuti vaswera vakamira muqueue achivavarira kuti ndigozoregister kuvhota. Kana aregister kuvhota vanenge vachiti kana taregister kuvhota zvozodii, hapana chinochinja. That's what they say. Saka havazomboisi effort yakanyanya kuti varegister kuvhota kwacho. Saka muno mutown hapana pakamboitwa zvitupa. And then the blitz, yes, it was successful for the women, nokuti vanga vachienda kwanga kune madzimai and the disability, it was a star because vaienda munharaunda mamune vanhu, especially kunyanya madzimai and the disability sector. Takatoitirwa chinhu chakanakisa nokuti kwakuri kutoti vauya kwataitiri isusu samadzimai tine mabasa akawanda ekuita pamisha. Saka pavanenge vauya kwatiri unogona ngospeyawo just a minute womhanya woenda panenge pachiitwa registration or wobva watoregister wobva wadzoka woita basa rako. Saka isusu samadzimai maonero angu ndinoona sekuti it was very helpful for madzimai kuti vaunzirwe the blitz kwavanenge vari.
Basically, the issuance of IDs as part of the voter registration blitz to some extent contributed positively in terms of voter registration, especially in the rural areas. There were some challenges that people were facing, especially coming from the rural areas to get or to access registration documents in the city. But when the blitz went closer to them, the turnout was somewhat good. Quite a number of young people managed to get their national IDs and their birth certificates and also went on to register to vote. However, there are some deep-rooted issues in rural setups that maybe could hinder some people to get their registration documents. For example, most of the rural folks, some of them, the parents might be in the diaspora or in the neighboring countries. So for them to then attain their national IDs, they would maybe require a letter from the chiefs, or so the process becomes tedious. In the urban setups now, the context is a bit different because it's always close to town, but maybe only the long queues were turning out people for them to then go to the registrar's office to attain national IDs. But after people managed to attain their national IDs, quite a number of young people managed to register to vote, particularly the so-called millennials, Ama2K. Maybe with the case of Gweru, some people really managed to register to vote. And we cannot call that maybe a stronghold of ZANU-PF per se. So maybe it's just political grandstanding. But to some extent, I would say that voter registration blitz contributed positively in terms of people accessing voter registration. The only maybe unfortunate thing is that the days were so short. They did it maybe in a space of usually 10 days, which would maybe not cover the whole lot of the rural folk. But for the urban setup, these already have quite access to our voter registration centers. The provincial office is in town, the district office is in town. So, to my thinking, that this was supposed to basically then focus mainly in the rural areas, because that's where there's lack of access to these offices. Someone cannot maybe part with $6 to $8 to just come and register to vote in the urban setups. So maybe if these allegations are emanating from something like that, yeah, people have got their own thinking. But to me, it was a positive thing that this focused mainly in the rural setups, where people have got no access to these centers because they are based mainly in town. Maybe in summary, this year, the issue of voter registration, we have seen quite a number of young people turning up to register to vote, maybe for the first time. Usually young people take a back seat when it comes to issues of voter registration. But due to this blitz and maybe due to the efforts that have been done by civil society, this year we have seen quite a number of young people, and some are still even turning up to go and register to vote, thanks to the blitz that maybe the Electoral Management Board had conducted earlier. Though the days were quite short, but we hope that maybe the ground that has been covered would maybe also be motivation enough. But in the future, it will be wise then for the Electoral Management Board to start this voter registration process earlier, not only towards elections. Maybe just soon after this election, it will be wise that maybe ZEC should also start maybe registering people for the 2028 elections just soon after the 2023 harmonized elections. That would minimize the pressure when we are now heading towards the election in 2028.
Actually noticed that there were not enough platforms or spaces, and also these areas also were not reachable for a lot of people. So this actually hindered the process of getting identity documents. Having an ID is actually something that has to be very easy, instant, and also accessible to each and every person. But we can see that some of the centers that they had actually said people should come and register to vote were not accessible for a lot of people, especially women. We are looking at the issues of women being the caregivers. Women do not have a lot of time to get out of the house, spend hours on end trying to get their identity documents and registering to vote. So this was actually a hindrance, and people had actually cried out that as there is this blitz, mobile registration should also include the mobile registration for identity documents, where the registrar is also the voter registration centers should be accessible to the people, or rather be mobile. So we actually saw that in urban areas it was not as difficult as it was in the rural setup, because in rural areas we're talking of the issue of distance, the proximity of these centers to the voters themselves. So a lot of people did not manage to actually have their identity documents taken for those people who had not yet registered. And for women it was more difficult because of the issue that I highlighted before of caregiving. They do not even have the time to go to the voter registration centers to ensure that they have their IDs, and also have they're also ensured that they are registered and they're on the voter registration roll. We also see that there is another issue in the urban setup where they actually bunch people in the particular district or in the particular constituency that they should be registered in. You can see that there are wards that have a very large population, and through the delimitation process, some of the populations were shifted from a different ward to another ward. So those hiccups and those in uncertainties, where do I have to go, where do I have to register to vote, which area should I be in, were not very clear for some people, and the people ended up saying, this voter registration exercise is quite lengthy, they do not have time for it. Some do not actually have IDs to go to them, to first go to the registered office to try and take a birth certificate, and then an ID would become a little bit more cumbersome. So it was really needed that the registrar be mobile and also execute their duties in such a manner where it doesn't take a lot of time and the process is not cumbersome itself.